Thanks very much, Glenn. Look, I'm going to give you a bit of a snapshot of the new coaching panel and also talk about pre-season. But before I do that, I certainly want to just maybe give you a little bit of an idea of my journey and I guess how I'm standing here tonight. It started, I suppose, when Peter initially rang me midway through last year, and initially there was certainly no interest in becoming a senior coach. I guess the journey started to take shape after I realised that I was going to not continue at the Sydney Swans, and Peter was quite persistent in the phone calls that he made to me. The journey then took shape a little bit when I met with the leadership group, and that was certainly a real eye-opener, talking to sort of 7 or 8 young men at another football club. I didn't have much idea about what was going on, but certainly when I left that meeting, my interest was really sparked. Probably the worse it sounded, the more interesting it got. I then met with Dave Misson, who was the fitness guy who worked with me in 2005 when we won the premiership, to get another insight about what was happening at the football club, and subsequent to that, as you know, agreed with Peter and Glenn. I think one thing that struck me was the quality of the people that Peter had started to put around him. And Peter mentioned before that football clubs are all about people and culture and driving behaviours. And I could see the change had already started. Josh Marnie was there, and I had a lot to do with Josh in the early stages. And obviously his input was invaluable, and having Josh involved in the football club was fantastic. So I'm really, really pleased, I must say, that Peter was so persistent. I went from last year not being interested in coaching a football club to standing here now being extremely excited and extremely passionate about this football club in a very, very short space of time. So I'd firstly like to thank Peter and Glenn. It is quite fascinating. I grew up in Melbourne, as you all know. I grew up in Donvale and Doncaster and been away from Melbourne a long, long time. But I'm really, really enjoying being back involved in football in Melbourne. We were joking about it before, the Swans boys, that I think I went to one AGM in Sydney. There was 15 people there. It went for about 15 minutes. And question time was, well, guys, if you want any questions, we'll just wander over the bar and you can just ask them as we're sort of standing around. So it is a little bit different when you get to Melbourne, which brings me on to the next point of thanking personally all the Melbourne supporters and Melbourne members for embracing me over a short space of time. I mean, it's incredible to see how many people come out to training, watch training. Probably more people come to one of our training sessions here than went to the Swans in 8.5 years, and I say that seriously. Even in 2005, when we led into the grand final, we wouldn't have had that many people at training. Particularly the Australia Day, the Monday of Australia Day, was great to see so many people. Talking about volunteers, very, very difficult to get volunteers and water boys and runners and all those sorts of things. The first time I went out to Melbourne training, there was about 15 water boys and girls out there, which was quite an eye-opener as well. So it's great to be back involved in football in Melbourne, and it's great to be involved in this great football club, and I'm really, really excited standing here tonight for the first time talking to the members. Probably the best way to describe the pre-season is to talk about the coaches and then introduce the 3 players that are here also tonight, and talk a little bit, and that'll give you an idea of the journey. I guess one of the, and I say this with all due respect, probably one of the things that was appealing about the job, and this is no disrespect to the guys that were involved in the coaching group because they didn't really know them, but it really was a blank canvas. None of the coaches were contracted except for Jade, who's sitting here tonight, and I'll talk about that. So what that did allow me to do was assemble guys that I knew and obviously respected, but also knew what I was all about. I certainly believed we didn't have enough time to coach the coaches and then coach the players. So it was really, really important that I was able to assemble a coaching group that, as I said, knew what my ideas were going to be and knew how to impart them on the players. But equally as important, and maybe the guys can stand up as I chat about them when we go through. Probably the first one was Jade, and Jade was still here, so I'd ask Jade Rawlings to stand up firstly and just welcome Jade. Jade's input has been invaluable, and to have him involved in the football club previous to the rest of the boys getting here was certainly been invaluable. He's been a terrific help to me, and also gives us a reference point. We have no idea where this club has been, other than the fact that what we've read in the paper and what I've said on the couch, which has probably not been that complimentary at times. But Jade, is great to give us a reminder of where the players have been and also where they where they are now, and sent me a great summary of pre-season and how much improvement he feels that the team has made. That was just on Friday night, so it's fantastic to have him involved in the football club. We then have the two midfield boys that have come, which is Benny Matthews and Georgie Stone, and I'll ask them to stand up and they'll be in charge of our midfield this year. Benny's the 2005 Premiership player for the Sydney Swans and was working for the Gold Coast Suns last year, and actually through one of my mates at the academy who'd actually spoken to Benny about a job and said to me, have you thought about Benny Matthews as a coach? And I said, well, I have, and contacted Benny. So it's fantastic to have a young coach recently out of the game, but also a Premiership player involved with our midfield and imparting the wisdom on what is a pretty young midfield group. So it's great to have Benny involved. The wise old man of football is Georgie Stone, and Georgie was probably going to give it away at the end of the year, and he was working with Sydney. And George was recently asked, I think we were at lunch, and George said, how are you enjoying? He's just moved from Baldwin to Abbotsford, and said, how long does it take you to get to training, George? He said, 10 minutes. He said, how's that? He said, well, last year it was taking me 4 hours to get to training. He literally got up at 4:30 in the morning, had to drive to Tullamarine Airport, jumped on a 6 a.m. plane, generally arrived at sort of 7:30, 8 o'clock, and did literally take him 4 hours to get to training in Sydney. So I guess it's probably was fortunate for us that George was thinking of giving it away at Sydney and just probably had enough of the travelling. Like all of us here, we have an enormous respect for the Sydney Swans Football Club, so it certainly had nothing to do with that, but more a case of the fact that he'd had enough travelling. So it was great that George agreed to come on board. He's got an enormous amount of wealth and wisdom in terms of his football knowledge. So we're really confident with these two guys, Georgie and Benny. Our midfield's in really good hands. The forwards coach this year is Daniel McPherson. Probably, it's interesting, and I say this with no disrespect to Dan, but Dan was probably the last guy that we employed. And Josh and I went through. Well, Josh and Daniel actually has been like Benny has had a news agent. Dan's is in Bowral. Dan played under me and then coached under me as well, but been out of football for a couple of years. And we wanted to make sure the process was thorough in terms of not getting, too much ex-Sydney. But really, at the end of the day, both Josh and I made the decision that I was so comfortable with Dan's character, and that's what we wanted to focus on bringing into this football club. We certainly interviewed a lot of really good candidates towards the end of the process, but from my point of view, it always come back to quality of character, and that's why, in the end, as well as Dan's fantastic football experience and the knowledge that he brings, it really probably epitomises what I wanted to achieve, and I know what Peter's already talked about and Glenn as well. We want to get as many quality people involved in this organisation as possible, and at the end of the day, Josh and I looked at each other and said we've got to get Daniel McPherson involved, both from a football point of view but certainly from a character point of view. So I'd really like to thank Dan for coming on board, and Dan will be looking after the forwards this year. The two guys that are in charge of our development department will be Brett Allison and Brad Miller. I suppose Brett's credentials really speak for themselves. Premiership player, then went up to Sydney Swans and played for a year. Coached under me, coached the seconds with Daniel McPherson, and has been back at North Melbourne now for 3 years as well. So it was fantastic when he agreed to come on board also to run the development department. I think one of the things we also wanted to try and achieve was to try and get some links back to the Melbourne Football Club. And not that I ever knew Brad Miller, but I always was found a bit strange why he left Melbourne. I had a lot of respect for him as a player, and I thought he was one of the guys that certainly should have continued with the Melbourne Football Club and played the whole career with the Melbourne Football Club. So I think through the Coaches Association we did get word that Brad was was keen to get back involved in football, and certainly Josh and I really jumped on that opportunity to get him involved. He's a terrific football person. Again, he's a terrific character of a person, and to have him imparting the wisdom on the young players is fantastic. But to have to Melbourne, we thought was really, really important. So it's terrific for Brett and Brad to be involved. Thank you. I'll talk briefly about pre-season and probably talk more about the season when we get to the season launch, prior to round one. But one of our goals was clearly to help the midfield. I mean, last year the midfield really struggled, really in depth. That was one of our main focus areas, getting into the draft and trading. And we think we really did that with a number of players, 3 of which are here tonight, and I'll introduce them. As I said before, we really had no preconceived ideas of what the Melbourne Football Club was like when we arrived. And one thing I will say about the players is they train hard. I mean, they do have terrific habits and they do have a terrific work ethic. And they do have a real hunger for success. I think one of the things sometimes fans forget, and we're all fans, whether we're fans of football or American football or anyone wants the Super Bowl today. If you talked about the Denver Broncos who got beaten 43-8, I guarantee they weren't trying to lose 43-8. I mean, every player tries. And I know sometimes it looks like perhaps they're not, but what I will say, you do have a player group that is hungry. They are hungry for success. They perhaps don't know how to go about it, and certainly without being disrespectful to anyone in the past, they certainly needed some direction and some leadership. But I can guarantee you they do work hard and they do want to be successful. And it's certainly the job of myself and the other coaches to point them in the right direction and to help them be successful over the journey. Like most clubs, and I guess the hardest thing about now is everyone gets up and says, we've had a great pre-season and we're bigger and stronger and better looking and whatever. He had his best pre-season of ever and et cetera, et cetera. Look, whilst we've made some significant gains and we've worked specifically on our game plan, the test for us is clearly going to come when we play, and I think Peter touched on it before, is one thing we don't know is how scarred the group is and how down on confidence they are and how soon we can get that up. But we're certainly looking forward to playing. It is going to be a bumpy road. We are a 2-20 team, and I think the more relevant stat is 52 or 54%, which means you're getting double just about every single week you play. So we're certainly aware as a coaching group we do have a long path to go. But the only commitment that I will give, and I never talk about games won, I mean, what we try and talk about at the football club is setting behaviours and setting standards and setting a game plan that will be consistent, and setting a game plan and behaviours we think will eventually get us to where we want to get to, a la Hawthorn and Freo last year. So look, I obviously don't know how many games we're going to win this year. The only commitment I give you, we are heading in the right direction. I have no doubt whatsoever that we're heading in the right direction. I have no doubt whatsoever that we will get there at some point. And like Peter, I'm not going to make any hollow predictions or ask for you to regain your trust and ask for those 12,000 people to rejoin. All I can say is, I'm confident in the player group that I've got at the moment. I'm super confident in the coaching staff that we've got and the management around the football club, and the excitement and the enthusiasm has been fantastic. I know we've still got to start playing, and I know we've got a lot of work to do, but we're up for the fight, and at some point we'll win the fight. So again, I want to thank you guys all for accepting us and as a coaching group, and certainly the positivity's been fantastic. And I'd now like to introduce 3 of our recruits, Daniel Cross, Bernie Vince and Dom Tyson. As I said, I mean, probably one of the great things about talking to the players is maybe, and they all come from other clubs. I think one of the consistent themes, both from all the coaches and certainly the players can speak for themselves, but I guess as bad as the team went last year, 2-20, I didn't have any pushback from any of the coaches about joining the club, and certainly from any of the players joining the club. Crossy, maybe you want to kick that off. I mean, you and I spoke, early on, just before trade week, and you were super keen right from the start to be involved in the Melbourne Football Club.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll just say firstly, it's great to see so many people here, and thank you for your support so early on in my days here at Melbourne. When I got the news at the end of last season that I wasn't going to be playing at the Bulldogs anymore, I still felt that I had the ambition and drive to play at the top level. I still felt that I had the ability to do that, and I certainly had the hunger and the appetite to work. And I think the mental side of the game is probably just as hard as the physical side of the game. And I think once that leaves you, that's when it becomes really hard. But that certainly hadn't left me. I was still, like I said, really hungry to train and do all the hard work to play at the top level. And when I spoke to yourself and Josh and a couple of other guys, the opportunity to stay here in Melbourne. At a great club like Melbourne, such great history, the oldest football club in Australia. It certainly is an honour to still be playing at the top level and to be at this club. So, yeah, I'm really happy.
And I've talked about my views of the footy club, but maybe from a guy that's been another footy club for a long period of time. I mean, your initial thoughts of the players and how they've coped with the pre-season so far.
Speaking about a 2-20 side, I just, and the other guys would say exactly the same thing. I just wouldn't have known any different. The spirit level of the group, the first day that I came in was quite amazing. The intensity that they train at and the willingness to listen to the coaching staff and wanting to learn has continued on throughout the pre-season. It hasn't just been, 1 week on, 1 week off. Every single day we come into train and we've been super excited. It's a very bubbly group. Certainly some great characters within the group, and that's made it extremely enjoyable for me. Certainly got one of them here. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and like you said before, really attacking training every single day.
And I guess, Bern, yours probably come as a bit of a shock. I mean, if we wind the clock back to our first meeting, it was happened pretty quick. I mean, you were on the way to the States from memory, and as a best and fairest winner from the Crows, it did become a bit of a shock. So maybe just tell it gives the people a bit of an insight into trade week and how difficult that can be.
Yeah, well, obviously, I was heading off to America. I think we caught up 2 days before I left or something like that. So. Caught up and made the decision over there, so it was a really, quick decision. I thought about it a lot and saw a real opportunity to be able to play through the midfield for Melbourne. And as Crossy said, coming here, it's been really exciting, and the drive from the group and the fitness levels of the guys are, a lot higher than what I expected. So it's been great so far.
And I guess one of the points you made, probably the initial reaction about going to Melbourne, and then I think what we did is actually put the team on the board when you came through. And I suppose, the perception of a lot of people when you look at a 2-20 team is, there's definitely no talent. But I think your observation seemed to be pretty spot on. You saw a lot more talent than perhaps a 2-20 side.
Yeah, and it's probably the forward line was the real spine of the side, apart from, I guess, the midfield at that stage. Had a real upside, I thought. So, and the defence, with Chip Frawley and Tommy McDonald and these guys had real sort of key position guys that can really play. So, with all that in place, I could see the fortunes turning around really quickly. And some teams have done that in the past. A few years ago, West Coast, and we did it a couple of years ago at Adelaide, and. Teams can turn it around really quickly, so I'm hoping that can happen here over the next year or two.
And Dom, maybe as the three up here, they're certainly the youngest of all three, and probably haven't played as much football. So just perhaps give the crew here a bit of an insight into your pick three, but had a lot of injuries. So maybe just give us a bit of an insight into your couple of years at the Giants.
Yeah, sure. As you mentioned, I was drafted 2 years ago from the Oakley Chargers in Melbourne, and spent 2 years up at the GWS Giants, and had a couple of years where I probably couldn't get on the park as much as I would have liked, but certainly feeling much better now, confident for the year ahead.
And I suppose, like myself, coming back from Sydney, I mean, you're only up there for a couple of years, but your thoughts on the difference, the significant difference, going to Sydney and then coming back here?
Yeah, I think you were probably in the better part of Sydney, Roosie, than us, so... Yeah, but as you say, I mean, a massive difference for me is just you come to training and there's people there to support you, and just sort of gives you that sort of, I guess, a bit more of an internal lift just to perform. So,
well, guys, I might wrap it up now because I think we've got to move on to other matters. Glenn, is that right? But I'd certainly like to thank the three players, and for those of you, we've got a practice game this Friday, come down. But actually last weekend, probably the four best players were the three up here and Jack Watts in the practice game last week. So, certainly from our point of view, it was really important. Obviously, we know a lot about Crossy and Bernie, but it's great to see Dom out there playing really, really well, in a significant role. So we're really excited as a coaching group. Certainly the three guys that are up here today, along with a couple other boys we got from other clubs, are going to add significantly to the talent level of our midfield this year and are going to play a very, very significant role in what we try and achieve. So thank you very much for having us all tonight.